Okay, we're live. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for another session of the Land Use and Transportation Committee. My name is Malia Cohen. I'm the chair of this committee, and to my right is Supervisor Scott Wiener. He is the vice chair. To my left is Supervisor Aaron Peskin. Our clerk is Victor Young, yes. And I also want to recognize Jim Smith, and Leo DeAssis, who are televising this meeting on SFGov TV. Mr. Clerk, do you have any announcements for us today?
Yes, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk.
All right.
Items acted upon today will appear on the August 2nd, 2016 meeting of the Board of Supervisors unless otherwise stated.
Thank you. Could you call item 1?
Item number 1, resolution authorizing the sublease between the City and County of San Francisco as the tenant and sub-landlord and the Crossroads as the subtenant of 4,124 rentable square feet in the building located at 167 Jesse Street for an initial term of 5 years. All
right, thank you. So, colleagues, today we have Mr. Brian Chu from Mo's City to present on this item. Mr. Chu, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Members of the committee, as you may recall, back in January of 2015, you approved the city entering into a lease for this space at a time when we were eagerly looking at opportunities for the city to be able to provide some additional space for our nonprofits. And as you may have seen in today's Examiner, I think we're very excited that this is one of those opportunities. Back in 2003, I'll just give you a very brief summary of the history. The initial landlord for this space, Third and Mission Associates, entered in an agreement with the California Historical Society. It was a 99-year lease as part of a restructured deal with what was then SFRA and what became the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure. About 10 years later, the California Historical Society decided they did not need the entire 15,000 square feet and was going to return that to the landlord. The OCII Commission rightfully was concerned about the loss of nonprofit space, and so as part of that agreement, the landlord agreed to enter into an 87-year lease with the city for approximately 4,000 square feet of unimproved space. Along with that, there was a portion of the payment that was going to come to the city characterized as community block grant program income, which would allow for the capital improvements necessary for that space. So the city agreed to enter into that long-term lease for $1 a year with the landlord. We then worked with our colleagues at OEWD to come up with a process to identify the appropriate nonprofit for that space. We wanted to line it up with the recommendations that came out of the working group on nonprofit displacement. And so we issued an RFP in September of 2015. We distributed information about that through the Human Services Network and many city departments. 25 different nonprofits indicated interest in utilizing that space. 2 different nonprofits completed applications, and after review, the city determined that the youth organization at the Crossroads was the best organization to utilize that space. Since that time, in the fall, At the Crossroads has been working with the Department of Real Estate to finalize the sublease agreement. And at this point, we come to you to ask you to authorize that lease. Between the city and At the Crossroads, we propose to enter into a 5-year lease with a one 5-year option to extend the term of that sublease. We're very excited about At the Crossroads in particular because of its focus on reaching out to homeless youth and young adults. As some of you may be aware, At the Crossroads is really a national leader in services to the homeless youth population. They're going to be offering one-on-one case management services at that site. as many of you may know, it's become increasingly more and more difficult for us to identify spaces for these kinds of direct services. And so we're really excited that we're able to provide this for At the Crossroads. I'm here to answer questions. We also have Joshua Keene from the Department of Real Estate that put together this lease, and we have Rob Giddings, who's the Executive Director of At the Crossroads. I'd like to ask Rob, if you wouldn't mind, if you might want to come up and make a few comments.
Thank you so much. It's incredibly exciting to be here. 2 years ago, when Prado bought the building and then eventually let us know that we would not be having our lease renewed under any circumstances, we faced a really uncertain future. And that was terrifying for us, and it was terrifying for our clients. For the last 18 years, our organization has been helping young people on the streets of San Francisco with a focus on the most disconnected kids who fall through the cracks of traditional social services. And we didn't know what would happen. We don't have the option of moving out of the city for cheaper rent. We need to be right where our clients are. When this opportunity presented itself, it was basically like a dream come true. And when we were selected, we were overwhelmed. It was the single most important moment in our organization's 18-year history. It will allow us to help every year more than 1,000 young people in San Francisco get the support that they need to move beyond the streets and build outstanding lives. A lot of our office use is going to allow us to expand. The money that we save with the space will allow us to reinvest in the young people we work with. I just want to thank a couple of people really quickly. I want to thank Josh Keene from the Department of Real Estate. I want to thank Brian Chu from MOHCD, Lex Leifheit with OEWD, Bill Whitty with Related, who are the owners of the property, and the Nonprofit Displacement Mitigation Fund. But I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. We're really thrilled to have it.
Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Chu, is that it? All right, colleagues, do you have any questions for Mr. Chu? No? All right, let's go to public comment. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to come and speak on item number 1, please do so. Just by way of reminder, you'll have 2 minutes. You'll hear a soft chime indicating that you have 30 seconds remaining. All right, seeing no speakers for item 1, I'm going to close public comment at this time. Thank you. All right, the matter is in the hands of this committee.
I would move that we send this item to the full board with recommendation as a committee report.
All right, thank you very much. And without objection, that motion passes unanimously. All right, Mr. Clerk, let's bring up item number 2.
Item number 2, ordinance amending the administrative code to revise the residential unit conversion ordinance to require hosting platforms to verify that residential units on the city's registry prior to accepting a fee for booking a short-term rental transaction, and to provide an affidavit of compliance to the city and retain certain records, authorize the Office of Short-Term Rentals to issue an administrative subpoena to obtain records, provide for civil, administrative, and criminal penalties against hosting platforms for a violation of their obligations under the residential unit conversion ordinance.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Peskin is one of the authors of this item, and looks like Supervisor Peskin has some opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Supervisor Campos, who is the lead author of this legislation, which is really a series of technical amendments to the short-term rental enforcement legislation that Supervisor Campos authored and I co-authored with Supervisors Avalos and Marr, which this board passed last month on a vote of 10-0. And insofar as Supervisor Campos is not here, I just wanted to make some remarks about the ordinance, which is pretty straightforward. It's still to require that hosting platforms do business with law-abiding hosts and ensure that they're not aiding and abetting scofflaws who are further deteriorating our housing stock. It's a modest, common-sense regulation. I think it's fair to everyone. It's fair for law-abiding hosts so they won't have to compete with cheaters, and it's fair for San Francisco. Most residents want to give our short-term rental law a chance to work, but San Franciscans won't be played for fools forever if short-term rental platforms persist in trying to keep our law unenforceable. After conferring with the city attorney about Airbnb's legal arguments that they made after they filed litigation on the law that we all passed last month, it is our desire to simultaneously address Airbnb's legal objections while fulfilling the intent of the original ordinance with these few modest revisions that are in front of us today. Let's be clear, the reaction by Airbnb and other hosting platforms to our amendments will speak volumes about their willingness to work reasonably and in good faith for this needed regulation, or whether their real motivation is to continue to flaunt our tourist rental laws with impunity. At the end of the day, the board didn't pass this ordinance to litigate over the scope of federal law. Our intent is to make San Francisco's short-term rental law enforceable and fair. These amendments aim to accomplish exactly that by simply making the language more precise, by making modest changes in record-keeping requirements, and by tailoring enforcement to work through administrative subpoenas rather than a publication option. Carolyn Goosen has done an incredible amount of work on this legislation. I want to thank her, and she is here from Supervisor Campos's office if you have any questions, as is Deputy City Attorney John Givner.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you very much. It's just a question through the chair to Supervisor Peskin. In terms of these amendments, I have heard that this will not necessarily apply to all short-term rental companies because of the way it's structured. For example, a company like VRBO that doesn't collect or doesn't actually necessarily consummate the transaction. Can you comment on that? Because this has been reported to me, and I wanted
so
to...
insofar as that it's at the point of sale? Is that the argument that you are making through the chair? Why don't we defer that to Ms. Goosen?
Hi.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Carolyn Goosen from Supervisor Campos's office. And if Deputy Attorney, City Attorney John Givner wants to add to this, but from what I understand, the way that San Francisco defines a web platform, it is both a platform that facilitates the advertisement of units, but also actually is involved in the business, any kind of business transaction related to it. And so clearly, Craigslist is one company that would not be included in how we define a web platform. But for other companies where there is a business transaction that occurs between the platform, even if it's not exactly in the way that, for example, a company like Airbnb does it, they could also be, that company is relevant under this law if there is a business transaction plus the advertising.
Supervisor Supervisor Peskin has an answer as well.
So
that you'd like to jump
if you
in.
look at Section 41A4, line 4, the definition of booking service, I think it actually would apply to all platforms. A booking service is any reservation and or payment service provided by a person or entity that facilitates a short-term rental transaction between an owner or business entity and a prospective tourist or transient user, and for which the person or entity collects a fee in connection with the reservation and payment services provided for the short-term rental transaction. So as I understand, even these platforms that in essence charge for a listing, I think that they would be covered under that definition, but I'll defer that to competent counsel.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner. I don't frankly know exactly how VRBO operates. The ordinance, as Supervisor Peskin says, would apply to booking services, which is basically those that collect a fee in connection with reservation or payment service. I think Ms. Goosen is correct that Craigslist does not collect a fee in connection with a booking or payment service. I can't say as to VRBO's business model.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Supervisor Wiener, does
Yeah,
that
no,
answer
and
the
I asked the
question?
because I think it's really important in regulating short-term rentals that we're regulating as broadly as possible. We're not regulating some companies but not other companies, because different companies obviously have different structures, but they're all facilitating short-term rentals. And so whatever the challenge is with short-term rentals, and for all the reasons, the good reasons that we want to regulate them, it should apply to all short-term rentals. This measure, the measure that this amended, which I voted for, to try to improve and increase enforcement because we want people to comply with the law, to the extent that the amendments were to contract that and start basically exempting out certain companies and focusing on other companies, that would be an issue for me. I would be interested in, perhaps, I think this is a committee report for tomorrow, is that correct? Yes. Perhaps by tomorrow trying to get a better sense for that. Because I know this came up, I think the 30-day rule was waived on this, has sort of moved quickly, which I understand why. Because of the litigation, I presume. So I would like to have a clearer answer to that.
So maybe we can get Deputy City Attorney Kapla and Supervisor Weiner together.
All right. We are going to continue to move forward. Ms. Goosen, I don't know if you had a presentation that you wanted to, nothing prepared? No? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and go to public comment. All right, folks, I have a stack of cards here. I have Dale Carlson. Jim Lazarus, Peter Kwan, Ed Bell, Jan Neufeld, Rodolfo, and Karen Cancino. Please come on up. And if there's anyone else that'd like to speak, you can do so after the folks that I've called. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisors. Dale Carlson, Share Better San Francisco. In regards to VRBO and HomeAway, they have traditionally used a subscription model where you paid an annual fee to list your property on their website. They are moving to a model more like Airbnb's. They've seen how lucrative it is, and so they too are going to be taking a commission. They're going to be taking a percentage of every rental. I think it's ironic that we're here today, given that Airbnb spent $10 million last year telling us how much they hated the idea of neighbors suing neighbors. Here they are suing us, their hometown neighbors. Portland adopted very similar limitations on their listings long before San Francisco. Airbnb didn't raise a squawk. They spent $10 million bragging about the $12 million in hotel tax revenue that they pay to the city each year, and admonished us not to spend it all in one place. And yet now we're going to have to spend it defending the ordinance you passed unanimously. They are telling us that they're only in business to help home sharers, legitimate home sharers, middle-class people who are simply trying to make ends meet. And yet the thrust of their lawsuit is clearly intended to defend the people who are violating the law that you passed 2 years ago, who are not complying with the registration requirements. And they're using it, and they're using the First Amendment to defend their practices. Maybe we should buy some bus shelter ads of our own. Dear Airbnb, the First Amendment does not protect aiding and abetting. Love the Founding Fathers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
That's pretty good.
My name is Peter Kwan. I'm the co-chair of the Home Sharers Democratic Club. Supervisors, the reformulation of this platform liability law that's being considered today attempts to sidestep the legal flaws of the first version by redescribing the offense. Instead of making platforms liable for the posting of a listing without a valid registration number, this new iteration instead imposes liability on platforms when they take a booking related to a listing without a valid registration number. Putting aside whether this dodges the bullet regarding violating federal law, this new version is likely not to achieve the result it seeks. Platforms like HomeAway allow lists rentals for hosts, a subscription service, as my previous speaker has just described it. But in many cases, the booking itself, the contractual relationship, and the agreement on dates and rates, these are entirely between the host and the guest. HomeAway simply facilitates the transmission of the basic information and the payment mechanism. So if platforms like HomeAway don't accept or conclude bookings, they won't be liable under this new version of the law being considered. Hosts who want to avoid legal entanglement will simply migrate to platforms away from Airbnb to ones like HomeAway. We, the Home Sharers Democratic Club, think there's a better way ahead. Everybody agrees that the goal is to increase registration rates so as to maximize the number of compliant hosts. The platform liability law aims to achieve these results as well, but it is legally flawed, as I've said. A more productive and less legally controversial approach is to look at ways the current registration system can be improved to remove roadblocks and increase incentives to register. The Home Sharers Democratic Club has produced a lengthy and detailed list of reforms, both administrative and legislative, which we believe is a more productive approach to increasing the registration rates. So we urge the supervisor to consider this approach rather than one that will, in all likelihood, simply shift us from one platform to another and mar us in life.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good day. My name is Karen Cancino, a registered host that has submitted all required paperwork. Do you recognize me? I've been coming up here for 2 years. And I am getting tired of seeing you all, so I'm hoping that we're going to get this resolved soon. I could have decided not to come, but feel strong enough to come to represent registered hosts who cannot be here because of work or family responsibilities. It is quite obvious that each new requirement is an attempt to squash home sharing. Is creating a law by piecemeal the best way? Hosts are not registering. That is a fact no one disputes. They are being unfair to those of us who are. But I can understand their hesitation, as the city's actions toward short-term rental hosts has been an ongoing barrage over the past 2 years. I can envision opponents sitting around a table trying to think up what next can be regulated to discourage home sharing or hosts from becoming legal. It is time to give it a rest. Put politics aside, focus on solutions already suggested, simplifying registration, giving potential hosts a tryout period, and ferret out abusers. Despite all that has been thrown at home sharing over the past 2 years, it continues to grow. Citizens defeated Prop F. Please listen to the majority of San Francisco voters rather than grandstanding and letting politics rather than civic responsibility govern your vote. Driving out home sharers will make the city even more only for the wealthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jan Neufeld. I'm in District 8. I am a home sharer, and home sharing helps me be able to pay my mortgage and live in the city and place that I want to be. My 18th Street merchant neighbors also very much benefit from my guests and many others who come to the area because of the desirability of that territory. It seems clear to me that the proposed amendments would only push bad actors to other platforms. Let's not do that. Please read what home sharers have put together and work in that direction rather than being political, as was just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Jim Lazarus, San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. Last time I was here, we raised the very issues that you're trying in a small way, I guess with the advice of the city attorney, to correct, and that's the legal questions vis-a-vis federal law that were challenged in the legislation you approved a few months ago. The real issue here is getting people registered and having a registration process that works. Let's not beat around the bush and come up with 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 different amendments to try to fix different parts of this legislation. This was cutting-edge legislation 3 years ago, but where it failed, and that is a process that allowed the average citizen to feel comfortable and understand how to be registered, what the exposures are, how to manage the system. That's what you need to be dealing with. Having multiple pieces of information about your residents, having to come in person in an online era just makes no sense. If we want people registered, get them registered in a modern 21st century way. That'll fix the vast majority of problems. And lastly, that very complicated series of articles in the Chronicle yesterday, I think the bottom line to that was Our housing crisis in San Francisco is not and should not be fought on the back of home sharers. That's not what's happening here with probably 300,000 units of housing of all types in San Francisco. The few hundred units that might be in question are not the core of our problems here in San Francisco. If we spend as much time trying to maneuver through zoning changes, density bonuses, all the things that you've been dealing with, some you've solved, accessory units, some you haven't. Let's solve those problems and get on with building housing in San Francisco. Thank you.
And while the next speaker is coming up, I do want to note that the quotes in Ms. Saeed's piece from the chief economist at Zillow to the effect that some of the short-term rental behavior in San Francisco is exacerbating the housing crisis should not be overlooked.
Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Ed Bell. I live in Noe Valley. I've lived in San Francisco for almost 60 years. I am a host and I list through Airbnb. Last year I told my wife that we would have to sell our house in July of this year, leave the city we love, and join the hundreds of middle-income families who can no longer afford to live in San Francisco. I'm happy to tell you my house is not for sale, and I currently have no intentions of selling, and this is due to the income I can generate through Airbnb. I consider myself computer literate. I work for a company where almost everybody is under 35. They refer to me as their computer challenged colleague. I think that's because I never tweet. I have no idea how to find a Pokemon, nor what to do with one if I found one. I've tried to convince several of my senior friends to become hosts. Almost all are afraid to get into a business requiring the paperwork and computer interaction mandated by the city of San Francisco. Airbnb has eliminated one of the major filing requirements by collecting the hotel tax for us. They should be rewarded rather than penalized. Last week I filed my occupancy report. The computer-generated form stalled twice for over 20 minutes and then erased all my data before I could enter it. So I had to re-enter everything. A friend of mine owns a business which sells toxic chemicals. He does not have to report which days his business is open. I share a bed and pillow in my home. Why do I have to file these reports when he doesn't? Why is the city continually increasing and changing my reporting requirements? I believe these actions disproportionately affect senior citizens, many of whom are as computer challenged as I am. When you vote on resolutions limiting Airbnb and home sharing, I hope you keep your senior constituents in mind and vote accordingly. Help people like my wife and I hold on to our homes and stay in the great city of San Francisco. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm the other co-chair of the Home Sharers Group. And first of all, I want to thank Supervisor Wiener and Cohen and Supervisor Campos. All of them took meetings with us to talk about the improvements. Supervisor Peskin did not return our calls, unfortunately, but we'd be happy to meet with you still. We produced a 7-page report. We've met with the Office of Short-Term Rental, detailing lots of things that could be improved that we think would make it a lot easier for people to register as well as maintain their registration. In addition to that, it's not just about the Office of Short-Term Rental. This involves the tax collector's office as well as the assessor's office and some of the requirements that they put forth. We're going to be meeting with the tax collector's office this week. We have a lot of detailed suggestions about improvements. We also think there are a couple of legislative amendments that could make it more inclusive so that more people could come forth to register. We hold almost monthly workshops on registration, so we are in a unique position to understand why people aren't registering sometimes and some of the challenges they face, which are quite legitimate. We have tried to share this with the supervisors. We would like to share it with you too, Mr. Peskin. And we think that the law could be improved so that more people could come forward. We're all about maintaining long-term housing and only helping the people who really need this to stay in San Francisco. I'd like to also add, because I use VRBO as well as Airbnb, that the reason that people think it's not going to apply to them is because they use a third party to do the collection. So we would be happy to meet with the city attorney's office if we could help provide more insight on that as well. So you were all emailed this report that we created. Unfortunately, over the weekend, we didn't realize this process was going to move so quickly, but it's in your email boxes, and you're welcome to call us and invite us in to talk to us about more details. We have a lot of input on this. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Tony Robles. I work with seniors and people with disabilities with an organization called Senior and Disability Action. I'm just taken by all of the talk by the so-called home sharers and the home share platforms that ring of philanthropy and sharing when we're seeing that it has had a very drastic effect on the housing stock of San Francisco. We've seen neighborhoods, North Beach, whole blocks that we've seen evictions, and we've seen people using these short-term rentals as a business model. And at the same time, it's had drastic effects on the health of tenants, and it's had a drastic effect on the health of seniors who are living in stress, quite frankly, about whether or not they're going to be able to retain their homes. They live in fear of eviction, and the stresses lead to very negative health impacts. So I think what this really is about is accountability on the part of a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has really tried to do anything within its power to thwart regulations of any kind. So we're in favor of the amendments and the legislation that's being proposed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next speaker. And if there's anyone else that would like to speak at this time, please come up, get in line.
I'm Teresa Flandrick, and I am in support of this amendment. Anything that will help make it very clear that if you want to do business in San Francisco as a platform, you are required to follow the rules. You may not advertise illegal activity. If people aren't registered, that's an illegal activity. So I am completely in support of this. I'm also excited about this helping planning do what it's supposed to do, which is to ensure that a neighborhood is not impacted negatively in terms of the environment, the character of a neighborhood, no rezoning, that if you have a picture of 22 units within a block, units being used on various websites, that these platforms in being required to delist those can also help planning see, are there too many in this one neighborhood and we need to do something about that. If it's really about sharing a home, your home and one room, that doesn't affect our housing as much as entire units, entire buildings being taken off the market. And those people will never register because they are property, they own 8 properties, say, scattered throughout the city. They don't live here. They're not living in those buildings. Those people will never register. So it's to hold the platforms accountable for the illegal activities that have indeed been going on. And people do need to register in person. It's not about 21st century, but to make sure that person matches the paperwork. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Rodolfo Cancino, and we have one tiny little room that we rent out. We're registered. First, I'd like to comment on the multiplicity of attempts at regulating Airbnb because of unregistered hosts, such as the 571R itemizing every unit and every piece in a unit that seems to punish registered hosts and drive away non-registered hosts, accomplishing little or nothing while collecting a measly $130,000 for the city and just making people uncomfortable. That and other attempts at regulation also have the obvious taint of singling out one platform and encouraging hosts to go to other platforms. This proposed legislation of yours will create a carve-out for HomeAway, make it obvious, and also for RBO and for Craigslist. Did the city attorney or deputy city attorney basically say he doesn't know? He doesn't necessarily agree with Supervisor Peskin? How this legislation is going to affect HomeAway and VRBO and Craigslist? It's a carve-out. Our housing problem has been in the making for the past 40 or 50 years, especially with cities throughout California, not just San Francisco, where zoning regulations have slowed or prevented new construction don't blame Airbnb for the housing shortage. Yeah, maybe it's exacerbated it slightly or somewhat, but don't go around blaming it as you have for the past 2 years or more. In trying to finish this off, I'd like to comment on the individual who tried to rewrite the First Amendment with his little comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rodolfo. Please, next speaker.
Hi, my name is Kathy Wu, and I'm a San Francisco voter and a member of the Better Housing Policy. Our organization is committed to supporting solutions that address the housing affordability crisis in San Francisco. Unfortunately, we cannot support the Campos Amendment because it will actually make things worse. The proposed amendments would exempt companies that openly refuse to follow the city's primary residence requirement for short-term rentals, rather than working with hosts to make the registration process easier and simple. Supervisor Campos has proposed a loophole that will primarily benefit non-residents who own second or third homes in San Francisco. This is wrong and unfair. We could do much better. I urge the committee to please oppose this amendment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there perfect? Another speaker, come on down.
Good afternoon, supervisors, and thank you for taking action to put some teeth in the short-term residential regulation you passed several years ago. These technical fixes, blessed by the city attorney, address the companies who are making money illegally in San Francisco by facilitating illegal rentals. They can pay taxes all they want, but if they're facilitating illegal rentals, it's illegal. We wouldn't take tax money from drug dealers, from houses of prostitution, and the companies that are claiming to be such civic-minded people and yet have hundreds, thousands of units that they are collecting money on, making money on, and it's not right. So these fixes are attempting to handle that situation. It may be that there will be one or two other little technical fixes we have to get. But every company that makes money in any way off of an illegal rental in San Francisco should be stopped. Please pass this legislation with recommendation to the board.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on this item, on item 2? None? Okay, public comment is closed at this time. All right, the matter is back into the hands of this committee. Colleagues, is there a motion for this item? Supervisor Peskin, do you have a motion for this item?
I would like to move this item to the full board as a committee report, and given Supervisor Wiener's outstanding question for Deputy City Attorney Kaplan, why don't we do that without recommendation so he can get that answered?
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you. I was going to recommend that we put it out without a recommendation, so that makes sense to me, and then we can get an answer by tomorrow.
All right, this item comes as a committee report without recommendation to the full board. Without objection. Thank you. All right, Mr. Clerk. The next item is item 3.
Item number 3, resolution approving the disposition of land located in the southern one-third of the block bounded by Howard, Spear, Folsom, and Main Streets, Assessor's Parcel Block number 3740, lot number 027, by the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure as successor agency to the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency to Block 1 property holder LP.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Kim is the author of this item. However, I believe we're going to have a presentation by Shane Hart, who's here from OCII to present. Mr. Hart, good to see you again. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Cohen. Supervisors, my name is Shane Hart, and I work with OCII as a Transbay project manager. I'd also like to introduce Jose Campos, who's with our office, and Aaron Foxworthy, who's with our office. For the developer, Jenny Wong and Carl Shannon.
Where's Jose Campos? I don't see him. Oh, in the back. All right. Thank you.
The Land Use Committee action today is to approve the disposition of OCII-owned land within Trans-Bay Block 1 to Block 1 property holder LP, an affiliate of Tishman Speyer. This slide shows the timing of the Trans-Bay redevelopment plan, as well as other area plans that have been approved. Also in bold, you can see that in 2003, the former redevelopment agency purchased this portion of the Block 1 site for affordable housing. In April of this year, there was a redevelopment plan amendment that came before the board and it was approved. That plan amendment increased the tower height for Block 1 from 300 feet to 400 feet. In June of this year, the OCII Commission approved the owner participation and disposition and development agreement, as well as the schematic designs. This would be the last board action for this project. This slide shows the Trans-Bay redevelopment area within the overall Transit Center District Plan. As I've mentioned to you before, AB 812 and our redevelopment plan require that 35% of all of the units within Trans-Bay, within Zone 1 and 2, be affordable. OCII has land use jurisdiction over the former state-owned parcels as well as this parcel, and you can see that in the lower section of this map that's on the slide. The Planning Department has land use jurisdiction for Zone 2. Trans-Bay Block 1 is located on Folsom Street between Main and Spear Streets. This slide gives you an idea of the development program that has been approved. This slide shows the parcelization for Block 1. The top portion is the OCII-owned parcel, which consists of about 34,000 square feet. The lower parcels are the ones that are owned by Tishman, and those are about 20,000 square feet in total. The project summary, it's a mixed income homeownership project consisting of 391 units. 40% of the project is affordable, that's 156 units, and they'll be available to homeowners or to households earning between 80 to 120% of AMI. The affordable units are dispersed in the first 26 floors of the tower and in the podium. To provide protections for the BMR owners, there's been included a separate homeowners association for the BMR owners, as well as the developer has put up $225,000 for what we call an homeowner association dues assistance fund that can be used by the BMR unit owners in case there should be special assessments or large dues increases. 156 units are affordable, as I said. 80 of those units are in the tower and the townhomes, which are all funded by the developer. And then 76 units are in the podium buildings. And there is a subsidy of $19,180,000 that's being provided by OCII for the podium. Remaining costs are funded by the developer. Regarding the fair market value for the OCII parcel, the 33433 report concludes that based on the appraisal and the analysis that was done by KMA, the $19.2 million that OCII is receiving for its land is fair market value, and that OCII is receiving an additional $31 million of consideration beyond fair market value based on the current deal terms negotiated with the developer. This is a rendering of the Block 1 tower and podium. This is also a view from the Bay Bridge. Last Friday, the OCII executive director and I met with Supervisor Peskin, and he was concerned about the effect the construction defect litigation could have on BMR homeowners association dues. And the construction defect litigation is very common for condos, as I'm sure you all know. And as a result, we propose modifications to the board resolution, which allows BMR homeowners to access the $225,000 BMR Homeowner Dues Assistance Fund for construction defect litigation costs, and to include in the project CCR as a requirement that the market rate HOA pay for the cost of construction defect litigation without differentiating between market rate and BMR units in any of the settlements. Proposed changes to the resolution are on page 6, lines 12 through 20, and on page 7, lines 20 through 22. The developer has reviewed and agrees with these changes. With that, thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. All right, colleagues, I think we're going to go to public comment. Appreciate your presentation.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to move those amendments on page 6 and page 7.
Okay, I thought we would go do public comment, and then we can talk in depth a little bit about these amendments. I've got a little bit of a stack here. Let's see who's still here. We've got Laura Thompson. Are you here, Laura, still? Rudy Corpus, Charlie Lavery. I think I saw Charlie. Come on up. Rudy, Tom O'Connor, Danny Campbell, Tony Rodriguez, Joel Koppel, Adrian Simi. All right, Labor family, why don't you just all come on down? Welcome back, boys. We got Marcus. I'm sorry, Marcus, I can't read your last name. And go ahead, Rudy Corpus, we'll start with you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Rudy Corpus. I'm here representing United Players in support of the project. United Players has been an organization that's been serving the city of San Francisco for the last 22 years and 8 months. We're fortunate that we're located in a neighborhood where a dollar development is being built. And so with us being in District 6 with our organization there, we have built a great relationship with the project, the developers, Tishman and Spires, who's been helping and assisting us tremendously, not only just coming to our center and meeting the kids, but also donating their time with people with books and mentorship, and also helping to support our organization so we can continue to run and thrive. And so I'm here in full support of the project. I'm here with some of my people from the community. I'm born and raised in District 6, still live there. My kids went to school there. And I just want to say that this is the type of project that we need in order for people in our neighborhood to survive. We are probably in ground zero of displacement and gentrification, but when we have projects like this, it helps us to stay in a community where we're born and raised. And so, with the 40% and the AMIs and stuff, which we're a part of helping out, is a win-win situation for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Charlie.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen, Supervisors Wiener and Peskin. My name is Charlie Lowry. I'm the district representative for the operating engineers in San Francisco and San Mateo counties. I'm also affiliated with the building trades councils and the labor councils in both of those counties. As a representative of labor, I want to start by thanking you all for your civic service and your hard work on behalf of the citizens of San Francisco. With regard to the agenda item, I want to say that Tishman Spear has been a blue chip partner for the building trades in San Francisco, and we look forward to working together with them on this exciting project. Tishman Spear has been proactive in its efforts to strike the right balance of retaining neighborhood values and providing units for a wide range of incomes. I want to speak in support of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Namisny, and I'm here to show my support for Block 1 and for more affordable housing here in San Francisco. A year and a half ago, my wife landed her dream job as a flight attendant. As a condition of her employment, we had to relocate to Boston. This was a real tough decision to make, to pack up everything that we owned, to leave our rent-controlled unit in the Mission, and to say goodbye to our home. Well, as luck would have it, and after a cold Boston winter, a position became available for my wife at SFO. we were moving back to San Francisco. But now a similar apartment costs 40% more than we were paying before we left. This exponential rise in the cost of housing made our return to San Francisco seem almost impossible. But thanks to the mayor's office, a few forward-thinking developers, and the voters of San Francisco, we found a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually own a home here in the city. 1400 Mission, the all-below-market rate development, had a handful of units left that we qualified for. Although we haven't moved in just yet, this BMR program has given us something that we never realistically had before, and that's hope. Hope that we can finally have a permanent home here in the city. Hope that we can raise a family here without worrying about how we're going to make rent. Hope in the future. I encourage you to share this hope with other working families by approving Block 1 and more affordable housing here in the greatest city in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Danny Campbell, Sheet Metal Workers, Local Union 104. I, too, on behalf of the membership of the Sheet Metal Workers, put our support behind this project. It's refreshing to see this project building the type of housing that the city has not been building enough of lately, and that's for middle-income families, such as teachers, librarians, firefighters, and construction workers. So, like I said, it's a pleasure to see that. Tishman has and continues to be a strong industry partner with the San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council, and so we ask you to move this disposition agreement forward today. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Tony Rodriguez, and I'm with Local 483 Fire Sprinkler Union, and we are here in support of this project. What Charlie said, what Danny said about Tishman always providing well-paying union jobs with benefits is true, so I don't need to really go into that. But the exciting part is the 156 units. You know, I've mentioned many times that I have 3 daughters. One's a nurse, one's a teacher, the other one's going to school to be a nurse. And they live at home. They can't, we live here in the city, they can't afford to buy a house. Our construction workers can't afford to buy houses here in the city. And projects of this nature would really help to alleviate the thing of people having to move out. Yesterday, I was in Sacramento, and it was amazing, or Friday we went to Sacramento, spent the weekend. It's amazing the amount of people that I know that live in Sacramento and work in San Francisco and only do that out of necessity because they couldn't afford the rent and to buy a house here. So I ask you to help by approving this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors, Chair Cohen. Joel Koppel with Electrical Workers Local 6, here to voice our strong support for the item at hand. Union jobs are anti-displacement tools for the middle income here in San Francisco. Work is busy now, but our members are still being pushed out of the city once they need a home to house their kids and their family. Sometimes 15 to 20% a year of our members are leaving the city. That's why projects like this are of the utmost importance. Tishman Inspire has been more than a responsible developer here in San Francisco with the Illumina and Infinity Towers, also south of Market. The 160 Folsom is going to be a great project, also because of its proximity to the transit center. Looking forward to building this project and hope you would approve the disposition today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Tom O'Connor, President of the San Francisco Firefighters. And I, too, am here to support this project. This project not only represents a wonderful opportunity for our members to live in San Francisco, but it also allows, Tishman has helped us to explain the complicated process of applying for these units, enabling many of our members to stay in San Francisco and live and walk to work. And quite often when we talk about keeping public safety in San Francisco, people, they exaggerate and they talk about the big one, the earthquake or some sort of natural disaster. But what's more important about keeping public safety in San Francisco is when your personal natural disaster happens. If your kid is hit by a car, if your mother falls and breaks her hips, if life's everyday emergency occurs to you, you want to have your public safety partners here. And this project and Tishman Spear are helping us to do that. So we speak in support of this project, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Supervisors. My name is Adrian Seamy with Carpenters Local 22. Not much I can add, actually, that hasn't been said already, but Carpenters Local 22 does fully support this project. We're looking forward to working with a longtime partner, Tishman Speyer. I think it's great that the 156 units of affordable are scattered throughout the whole building. But I think most of all, what hits home for me is this is going to put apprentices to work. These are young carpenters, male and female, that live in San Francisco. They're going to have a nice job with benefits. And in today's world, that's what's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on this item? All right, public comment is closed. Thank you, folks. Now, the matter is back in the hands of this body. Supervisor Peskin has a series of, or has an amendment that he's going to walk us through.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So while I have every hope that there will be no construction defects in the project and no litigation, I think our primary policy concern and the reason that the developer has agreed to a $225,000 contribution for the below market rate 156 units is because we want to make sure that as condo dues rise, people like this gentleman will be able to continue to pay those condo dues. And that's the fundamental reason for this $225,000 fund. But it is not uncommon, as Mr. Hart said, in residential condominium development to have construction defect and a little bit of litigation after these projects are built. And so I wanted to make sure that, number one, insofar as there are going to be, under the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that the developer has agreed to, 3 different homeowner associations: a BMR homeowner association, a market rate homeowner association, and a master HOA, which would actually require a supermajority vote in order to raise annual condominium dues or special assessments above certain percentages, 10 and 5%. I wanted to make sure that we actually were thoughtful about litigation if it should occur, and so I wanted to make sure that the BMR Condo Association was not disadvantaged in that unlikely but possible event. And so to that end, one, in the second paragraph on page 6, we made it clear that the $225,000 could be used for the affordable unit HOA's costs, including litigation costs if they should ever rise. And furthermore, a provision that says that if the market rate HOA would like to pay for all of the litigation costs, they can do so, provided that any settlement would be shared equitably between the market rate and BMR HOAs, subject to the relevant governing laws of the state of California and the Bureau of Real Estate. And those are set forth on page 6. And I want to say, Mr. Shannon, I know it's never fun to put money into a well-meaning, good-spirited fund that could be used against the developer in litigation, and hopefully that won't happen, but I want to foresee the unforeseeable here, so thank you for agreeing to those, and the developer has agreed to those in the sub 4 on line 20 to 22 on page 7, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I want to thank OCII and their director, Ms. Bowie, and Mr. Hart for helping craft the language around the suggestions that I made on Friday.
All right, thank you for the amendments. Let's go ahead and take a motion to accept, or if someone could make a motion to accept these amendments, we can keep this.
So moved.
All right, thank you. So a motion to accept the amendments has been moved, and without objection, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Now, on the overall piece of legislation,
I would like to make a motion to send the item as amended as a committee report with recommendation for hearing tomorrow, July 26th.
All right, the motion has been made, and without objection, this motion passes as a committee report with recommendation. Thank you. All right, Mr. Clerk, what do we have next?
That completes the agenda for today.
Excuse me?
That completes the agenda.
All right, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.